So I knew I was going to be happy to have you here, Devon, but I'm like really happy. Yeah, it just feels very important, so I'm grateful. Earlier today I was talking to an elder from our community. I was saying that, normally I'm like, teaching is not, it feels very, it just feels totally unpressured, and it's just like kind of friends sitting around talking about what's close to the heart. But on this night I said I was kind of freaked out, was the word that I used. And what he said was, he was like, I want to actually reframe that, to say that what you are feeling, or the complex threads of emotion coursing through the sangha, yeah, and I hope in both our comments here tonight, but also as we move forward, that we find some way of actually what may be impossible or paradoxical, but to find ways of aligning with all of the different stakes that people have in this. And in some ways I feel very, very poorly positioned to be leading the conversation, to be a white heterosexual cisgendered male, like speaking about the question of sexual violence, right? That's actually having lived a life that. Would it be like this for everyone? But that for me, the actual threat of the kind of fear of sexual harm is not in the kind of ambient life that I live. Yeah. And so I have to just acknowledge that, and I feel like over the last couple of years, really just my impulse, like in the Trump era, my impulse has been to just shut up, cry, and march. Yeah. But insofar as I'm one of the teachers for this group, I have to say something tonight, yeah? So just some kind of framing. We, as the teachers in leadership within Against the Stream, received allegations of sexual misconduct and against Noah, who's the founder of Against the Stream. And we moved to suspend his teaching privileges during a period, while there's a period of investigation that I'll say something about. And on the one hand, I've heard from people who feel like, well, we're abandoning the kind of presumption of innocence. Yeah, Noah has denied the allegations, and to move immediately into suspending a teacher is a radical action, kind of dramatic step, and so on the one hand there is this legal principle of the presumption of innocence, and then on the other hand our culture and spiritual communities have a kind of long history of erring on the side of the judgment of the man in power and being dismissive of the claims of sexual harm that people allege, yeah? And it's becoming clearer and clearer, like at this cultural moment, that an overdue moment, but that kind of default assumption of privileging the claims of a person in power is no longer tenable, yeah? And so that was the rationale in that decision. And so, for us, like we, as a teachers' council, which is six teachers, like we kind of found ourselves in sort of uncharted territory, and are like have learned in the steps that we have taken, and now have actually support from outside sources that can actually guide us in a process that is coherent and fair and attempts to safeguard the hearts of the people involved and support the sangha. And so there is a kind of an ethics and reconciliation process that we have that's part of Against the Stream. That's composed of Joanna Harper, one of the teachers, and a board member, and myself, and some members of the community, including a couple lawyers, and supported by Daniel Bowling, who's been the chair of the Spirit Rock Ethics and Reconciliation Council. And so together there will be some kind of investigation of this. And while that's underway and ongoing, we're really not here to litigate the facts in question, but actually just to say, like, okay, there's a process in place. I feel like it's a trustworthy one that has integrity, that is deeply committed to the truth and honoring the complexities of all of this. And so the question then for me is like, well, what's true regardless of the outcome of the investigation? Yeah. There are some things that are true regardless of what is found, of what the facts of the matter are. Yeah. And insofar as we can learn, we can reflect and learn something, this is really important. So there's been a kind of grieving process going on in me. Not that my sense of faith in Dharma or the abiding affection I have for the Sangha has been eroded, but there is this sense of like grieving, knowing that no matter what happens, Against the Stream is changed, yeah? And it's like you get, you kind of fall in love with a community, with an ethos, with something, and then to actually feel like, okay, this is an inflection point in this community, yeah? And to actually acknowledge, okay, whatever unfolds, my heart's going to have to adjust to a different kind of reality. Yeah. So, how then do we actually transmute the pain of this into wisdom and love? That's our question. That's really our task together. And I mean that when I say together. Yeah. No doubt, as I've been alluding, there are a lot of different ways the heart orients to this, and different views and, different sense of what's at stake. And so I don't want to align with any single stake, but to acknowledge the complexity of all of it, which means, it's the idea that some people are, whether they believe the allegations or not, that some people's sense of what practice is, or sense of even their very sense of well-being or one's sobriety, maybe, is somehow placed at greater risk by seeing the turmoil and pain of this. That's heartbreaking, yeah? And then there are people who may have very different stake in this. The people who, for example, people whose lives have been touched by sexual violence, and to have that be in the kind of field of our spiritual practice, and the way that kind of, potentially erodes the sense of safety, that breaks my heart too, Yeah. So, it's going to be a question of how we honor the different stakes that our heart has in this, and how we actually learn about, regardless of what unfolds with the investigation, how we actually learn about the ways that Against the Stream represents a kind of liberatory culture, and the ways in which it is unconscious and regressive and has some kind of unbalanced, unbalanced relationship with masculinity, with power, with sexuality. These are open questions for us. Yeah. Yeah. For me, I spoke about the Me Too question and movement, and I quoted this scholar, Kate Mann, who used this phrase that struck me: the banality of misogyny. Just the way that it's the kind of pervasiveness of sexism, of misogyny is it's so pervasive that it can be unseen in a way. And so in what ways is the ATS culture moving against that, and in what ways are we a kind of unconscious participant in that? Make of yourself a refuge for all beings. Yeah, that's the plea from the Buddhist texts. Make of yourself a refuge for all beings. Yeah. And we can ask questions, maybe hard questions, about the different levels of safety that some people feel within the community versus others. Yeah. And how our teachers and the leadership in some way wittingly or unwittingly perpetuating the creation of environments where some people feel deeply welcome and some people feel like they may not have space or safety or something. Yeah. This is a question about sexuality, but it's about more than that too. Yeah, it's about the sanctity of all lives, and especially the lives of women and trans folk. And this is Rebecca Traister writing about these questions. None of this is simple, none of it is easy. It's increasingly difficult to parse and live through. That's precisely because what we're picking apart is not some single thread. It is the knotted weave of inequity that is the very stuff of our professional and political and social assumptions and institutions are made. Having this conversation as if it's about sex and not about equality involves trauma and pain in its own ways. Memories of the visceral fear, physical pain, emotional suffering, of non-consensual contact that many of us have experienced to one degree or another. But even with all that pain, a focus on sex also lets us off the hook, permitting us to look away from the broader horrors, whole complex systems of disempowerment and economic professional vulnerability. Understanding the moment and women's reaction to it as only about sex crimes does contribute to a regressive understanding of women as perpetually passive victims of men's animal sexuality run amok. And while I share the fear that this moment will end with a recommitment to patrolling women's virtue and undermining their sexual agency, I am just as worried about what we will not do. That thing that is harder and more uncomfortable and ultimately inconceivable. Addressing and beginning to dismantle men's unjustly disproportionate claim to every kind of power in the public and professional world. Whatever unfolds, ATS probably needs to understand itself in a new way. That there's some, just as we are all on our individual path towards more understanding, liberatory understanding, that organizations need some kind of self-understanding too. And there's more for us to learn. Yeah. And in that process, I hope that we can offer each other refuge. Yeah. That through our kind of patience and willingness, sincerity, love, radical, courageous self-honesty, that we can actually offer each other refuge. Yeah. And we can take refuge in each other. Grow together. no doubt this will be, messy. Just like any personal upheaval and growth and development is messy, at the organizational level, it's messy too, yeah. And we will do our best to honor the complexities of all of it and to learn along the way and to keep our eyes on the North Star of the Dharma, namely non-harming. So may we do this as well as we can.